Have you ever thought that something as common as salt could be the most powerful spiritual weapon at your disposal? While many see it merely as a seasoning, the scriptures reveal that salt plays a fundamental role in spiritual battles. It purifies, protects, and seals eternal covenants. If you think this sounds mysterious, you're right. In this video, you'll dive into rare knowledge that very few people know, the true power of salt as revealed in the Bible. Ready to understand how such a simple element can revolutionize your spiritual life? Topic 1. The spiritual power of salt. Salt, which often goes unnoticed in our daily lives, holds importance beyond what we see. Since biblical times, it has been described as a fundamental element both in the physical and spiritual worlds. For those who understand divine mysteries, salt is not just a substance to flavor food, but a powerful weapon in spiritual warfare. Imagine using a simple grain of salt to strengthen your faith and protect your home from negative influences. And the most interesting part? This concept has been used for generations, and we often don't even realize its real power. In the video, the speaker highlights that salt was created by God with a very clear purpose: to be a tool for blessing and purification. This reminds us that God, in His infinite wisdom, uses the simplest elements of the earth to show us profound lessons. That's why salt, when used correctly, can become a powerful instrument of spiritual protection. Have you ever thought that a small handful of salt could be the key to breaking curses and bringing blessings? It's almost like carrying a spiritual weapon within everyone's reach. When we reflect on the use of salt in the past and its importance in the scriptures, we understand that it's not about superstition or magic. The truth is that there's deep symbolism and a spiritual connection that transcends the material. Next time you pick up salt in your kitchen, think of this. You have in your hands a tool that, when used with faith and understanding, can be transformative. And this transformation is just the beginning, because salt connects us to something greater, something that prepares us for the next revelation. Topic 2. Jesus and salt. Jesus in His ministry always used simple symbols with profound meanings to teach great spiritual truths. When He told His disciples that they were the salt of the earth, He wasn't just making a poetic comparison. He was assigning them the responsibility to preserve, influence, and transform the world around them, just as salt preserves food. This makes us wonder, are we really acting like salt in our daily lives, bringing healing and preservation where there is spiritual decay? This symbolism from Jesus is a call for each of us to be agents of change. Just as salt enhances the flavor of food, we, as disciples of Christ, are called to enhance goodness and truth in the world. But being salt is not just about adding flavor. It's also about preserving what is pure and true. In practice, this means that our actions and words should reflect this truth, always guided by the purpose of transforming negative spiritual environments into places of healing and life. However, just as salt can lose its flavor, we also run the risk of losing our spiritual essence when we stray from our purpose. Jesus warns us not to let our influence become ineffective. Being the salt of the earth is a continuous responsibility that requires spiritual vigilance. And this vigilance is crucial for us to understand the next step of this spiritual journey. Topic 3. Biblical references. The scriptures are filled with symbolism and deep meanings, and salt is one of the elements that frequently appears, representing covenant, purification, and justice. Since the times of the Old Testament, salt has been used in various situations as a powerful symbol in offerings made to God, such as in Leviticus 2:13, where it says to add salt to all offerings. This teaches us that salt is not just a physical element, but carries deep spiritual value as a sign of commitment to the divine. The concept of covenant is one of the central messages related to salt in the Bible. In 2 Chronicles 13:5, we read about the salt covenant made between God and the people of Israel, a symbol of an enduring and unbreakable pact. Just as salt preserves food, the covenant with God is eternal and unchanging. In practice, this makes us reflect on the depth of our spiritual commitments. Are we truly preserving our faith as something valuable and lasting, just as salt preserves what is essential? Additionally, salt is also linked to divine justice. When God punished the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, turning Lot's wife into a pillar of salt, it served as a severe reminder of the seriousness of disobedience. Salt here becomes a symbol of judgment and purification. This leads us to a deeper reflection on how we are living our lives in obedience to divine laws and how we can apply this wisdom in daily choices. Topic 4. Salt as a spiritual weapon. The use of salt as a spiritual weapon dates back to biblical times, and many do not understand the true power it holds. In the video, the speaker highlights that salt can bless, but also curse, depending on how it is used. This means it has duality in its purpose. Imagine using salt not just as a simple seasoning, but as an instrument of spiritual warfare, capable of breaking curses and purifying spiritually charged environments. Throughout the Bible, we see how salt was used in prophetic acts to mark God's territory and expel evil forces. In practice, many Christians have adopted the practice of sprinkling consecrated salt in their homes, praying for all negative energy to be removed. This is not superstition, but an act of faith based on the scriptures, symbolizing divine protection. Spreading salt in an environment accompanied by prayer can be a powerful way to claim that space for God, turning it into a spiritual sanctuary. This practice also reminds us that we should not underestimate small gestures in our spiritual life. Just as salt preserves and purifies, our actions can have a powerful impact if guided by faith and obedience. Salt can be used tangibly to mark our dedication to God and to ensure that our homes, families, and even cities are protected against evil. And this spiritual protection is just the beginning as we prepare to understand the greater role salt has in our spiritual lives. Topic 5. Practical use of salt in spiritual acts. The practical application of salt in spiritual acts is a tradition that spans centuries, and even today, many believers adopt it with impressive results. Salt, as we've seen, is not just a physical substance. It has deep spiritual symbolism that can be used for protection, purification, and even consecrating spaces. A common practice is to consecrate the salt with prayers and spread it on the doors and windows of the house, creating a spiritual barrier against evil forces. This act, when done with faith, can bring peace and security to the family environment. Another practical example is the use of salt in consecration rituals, where it is placed around altars or during prayer ceremonies to seal spiritual covenants. This practice is not restricted to religious contexts, but can be applied whenever someone feels the need to purify their space or life. Moreover, many Christians consecrate salt before major decisions or events as a way of asking for protection and divine guidance, recognizing the spiritual power it carries. These examples show that salt is much more than a simple element. It is a powerful tool when used correctly. By using salt in our spiritual acts, we reaffirm our faith and our covenant with God, making visible our commitment. And it is precisely this connection between the physical and the spiritual that makes salt such a powerful tool, preparing us to understand the concept of the covenant it represents. Topic 6. The Covenant of Salt. The covenant of salt, mentioned several times in the scriptures, carries a profound and eternal meaning. In ancient times, salt was a symbol of permanence and commitment, and the covenant made with it represented something lasting, which could not be broken. Just as salt preserves food, this covenant preserved the relationship between God and his people, showing that pacts with the Lord are unbreakable and enduring. This same symbolism applies to our spiritual life. The covenant with God, when established with faith and obedience, is a covenant that lasts forever. Topic 6. The Covenant of Salt. The covenant of salt, mentioned several times in the scriptures, carries a profound and eternal meaning. In ancient times, salt was a symbol of permanence and commitment, and the covenant made with it represented something lasting, which could not be broken. Just as salt preserves food, this covenant preserved the relationship between God and his people, showing that pacts with the Lord are unbreakable and enduring. This same symbolism applies to our spiritual life. The covenant with God, when established with faith and obedience, is a covenant that lasts forever. In practice, this covenant can be seen in how God uses salt to seal pacts with his people, as mentioned in 2 Chronicles 13:5. This salt covenant shows that the relationship with God is not just momentary, but eternal, and needs to be treated with the same seriousness and reverence. That's why many Christians, understanding the meaning of this covenant, consecrate salt in their homes, reaffirming their spiritual commitment to God, just as was done in biblical times. Every time salt is used, it reminds us of this ongoing and unchanging covenant. This practice also invites us to reflect on the depth of our spiritual commitment. Are we treating our relationship with God with the same respect and dedication that the covenant of salt symbolizes? This is a question we all must ask ourselves, as understanding this concept can transform the way we live our faith daily. And by understanding this covenant, we prepare to explore the numerical and symbolic aspects that salt also carries. Topic 7. Insights based on numbers. The use of salt in the scriptures also carries a numerical symbolism that cannot be ignored. For example, salt appears in crucial moments of biblical history, such as in David's victory over 18,000 Aramean soldiers in the Valley of Salt. This number is not just a war statistic, but represents the magnitude of divine intervention. Salt in this context was a symbol of purification and victory. This shows us that when we align ourselves with God's purposes, great victories can be achieved, even in the face of gigantic spiritual battles. Another interesting example is the story of the 300 sheep exchanged between a merchant and a shepherd in a salt covenant. This number represents the binding nature of the salt covenant, showing that even in seemingly ordinary situations, there is a deep spiritual meaning. The repetition of these numbers in biblical stories teaches us to pay attention to the details and understand that nothing happens by chance in the spiritual realm. What we can learn from this is that God uses even the smallest numbers to show us great spiritual truths. These numbers also lead us to reflect on the symbolism that salt carries in our lives. The salt covenant, with its eternal meaning, invites us to live with integrity and commitment. Just as David defeated thousands in the Valley of Salt, we too can win our own spiritual battles when we hold on to faith. And this numerical reflection is just the beginning, for the understanding of salt goes far beyond numbers and leads us to question our role in the spiritual context. Topic 8. Example exploratory questions. Exploratory questions are powerful tools to expand our understanding of what has been presented. By asking, for example, what the three spiritual functions of salt in the Bible are, we are led to deeply reflect on the symbolism that salt carries. We understand that it purifies, seals covenants, and also brings judgment, depending on its use. This reflection makes us realize that salt, when used consciously and with faith, can be a bridge between the spiritual and material realms, connecting us directly with divine intentions. By exploring how salt can be used both to bless and curse, we dive into a fascinating spiritual duality. Salt, in its various biblical manifestations, teaches us that God's tools have the power to create and destroy, bless and purify. It is a reminder that, as in our daily actions, the use of salt must be guided by wisdom and obedience to divine will. It is interesting to think that such a simple element can be used in such profound and diverse ways, and this prompts us to want to know more about its role in our spiritual lives. Finally, the question about the relationship between salt and spiritual warfare opens our eyes to what it really means to be in a spiritual battle. By using salt, we are called to act with faith and purpose, claiming protection and victory over the spiritual forces that surround us. And this goes beyond a symbolic act. It is a practical demonstration of how we can apply biblical teachings to protect our home and loved ones. The questions then are not just to be answered, but to lead us to a deeper level of reflection on our spiritual life.